Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. Hello there, how are you? I hope you're well. I had a fabulous birthday. I'm now 66. Get me? I'm an official pensioner. Dum dum dum. So how does being a pensioner make things any different? It doesn't make anything any different for anybody as far as I'm concerned. Everything is carrying on as normal, fingers crossed, and I will continue to work and I will continue to see clients and carry on with the podcast. So there's not going to be any immediate changes, but . Now today I think it's really important to talk about a present transit. I don't always talk about them, but I think it's important to talk about the transit that we are all going to go through at the moment, which is the Saturn and Neptune conjunction in Aries, and then the next 2 years of Saturn transiting through the first sign of the zodiac. So I'm going to do a couple of quotes, one from The Only Way to Learn Astrology, Volume 1 by Marion D. March and Joan McKevis, and I'm obviously going to use Astrology for Dummies because that's a super book. Now, if you're in private practice already, you'll probably know that, in private practice as an astrologer, that you will always have clients want to have readings during the transit of Saturn. And it would be the sign that Saturn is in. So Saturn's been in the sign of Pisces for the last 2 years. And I always get a lot of Pisces clients anyway, so there's no change there. But with it going through the sign of Aries, which it is already in that sign, I expect to see more Aries wanting to have readings. And since I've been in private practice for around about 30 years on and off, this is probably my practice's Saturn return, because Saturn takes about 30 years to transit through all the signs of the zodiac. It's between 28 and 30 years, depending on what sign it's in, how long it stays in there. So we'll go through what happens when Saturn goes through each house, but we have to take into account that Saturn's not travelling on his own. He's got a little sort of passenger in the vehicle with him. I always like to use the imagery of transits as if you were in a vehicle and other traffic is coming past you, but in this case you're going to have to use the imagery of that Saturn is in the driving seat in the sign of Aries and Neptune is the passenger, but it's the front seat passenger, the one that whispers in your ears or shouts at you or whatever it is they do. Okay, so Saturn's driving because he's quite a responsible planet. Saturn's driving down the motorway or wherever, but Neptune's whispering in the driver's ear. Neptune is going, oh, but you need to have another 5 minutes rest. Neptune's always urging us to go to somewhere completely different from where we are. Neptune wants to be in the imagination. So wherever your imagination lies, then Neptune will be guiding you to that place. It's a wonderful thing for hypnotherapists to consider about Neptune, because hypnotherapy is persons going within themselves into their imagination. So there's nothing real about hypnotherapy. It's all imagination, okay? But Saturn is the planet of reality, and there he is chugging through the sign of Aries. So get your chart. Let's go through which houses that will transit through in your chart and how that's going to work. Now, we have got a chart example today. We've got a poor little bod that has just been born and has been born into the Trump family, and this child is the firstborn of Trump's fourth child, who I think the mother is called Maria, but don't quote me. So it's one of Trump's wives that he was married to briefly. This is the child that they produced, and that child, who's a girl, has produced this baby. So I'm not going to do any background info. The reason I'm using the chart is that I want somebody with an Aries ascendant that natally has Neptune in the sign of Aries, which this little baby does. So Neptune briefly went into the sign of Aries last year in May. So this child is where we are now. So we are now Neptune in Aries, but Saturn is there as well, and I'll demonstrate what it is I'm waffling on about in a minute. So let's start with Saturn, because Saturn's in the driving seat. Okay, so now I'm quoting from The Only Way to Learn Astrology, Volume 1 by Marion D. March. And the reason I quote things out of books is because I don't have the brain cells sometimes to be able to articulate certain things. Okay? So she's got a keyword here, ingenious. Saturn in the sign of Aries. And it's she. There's two people wrote this book, okay? So I'm giving credit to both of them. It's Marion and Joan. And it's in the fall. So in medieval astrology, you've got exalted, you've got fall, you've got detriment, and a few other things. Anyway, fall ain't fun, right? Now, this would be if you had this natally yourself, Saturn in the sign of Aries, which our little chart I'm going to demonstrate them hasn't. They've got Neptune in Aries, right? But this is Saturn when it's in the sign of Aries. It's up to you to develop your many resources to strengthen your character. This is a difficult placement because Saturn imposes delays on the drive and energy of Aries. You are egocentric and you may find it difficult to recognize the rights of others. If you channel this energy properly, you will combine initiative with discipline and be very persistent. Then you will use your inventiveness to great advantage by taking charge in a positive way. Your many subconscious fears give you a strong desire for security. This position can indicate a father complex or, in a woman's chart, a jealous mate. Although your sense of timing is not the best, you have strong reasoning power and a love to debate. With difficult aspects, you may be superficial, defensive, impatient, and may constantly feel a need to justify yourself. You should learn tact and cooperation with others. Physical exercise is recommended. So this if you had Saturn in Aries natally. Now, we're not talking about it being natally this morning. We're talking about the fact that it's going to transit. But if we look at those discipline, persistent, drive and energy, those are all Aries things, but Saturn's going to delay that, so it slows it down. Now, Ray Orion in her Astrology for Dummies says, Saturn in Aries, you're an independent thinker. You can't stand to follow the leader, but you don't particularly like directing other people either. Although you are entrepreneurial, determined and disciplined, you also can be inconsiderate, argumentative and domineering. Given a goal and a game plan, you do fabulously well. Without direction, you flounder, but the goal cannot be imposed upon you. It must come from within. So Saturn, when it goes into Aries, it ain't happy. Saturn wants to lead, but because it's in Aries, it's a little bit more tricky to do that, because Saturn's, the planet, is going to slow the sign down. With me? So now I'm going to read to you from The Only Way to Learn Astrology. Neptune transiting through the sign of Aries. We're going to have to take two of these into account. They're both going to be together. They're going to be, Saturn's going to be the driving seat and Neptune's in the passenger seat, but still at the front of the car, okay? Neptune was last in Aries from 1861 to 1874. This transit brought with it the invention of dynamite, the machine gun and the typewriter. During this period of the US Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War took place, and the first women's suffragette law was passed in the state of Wyoming. I might have pronounced that wrong, so excuse me. Genetics were discovered and the Great Chicago Fire occurred. People born when Neptune was last in Aries pioneered many new religious and philosophical concepts. They shared a great sense of a mission to be fulfilled. They expressed strong imagination, creativity, and self-awareness. An afflicted Neptune produced schemes filled with false pride and egotism and people who craved notoriety. She's given some examples here. So we've got Benjamin Franklin, the writer H.G. Wells, and somebody called Sun Yat-sen, who was a revolutionary, and Swami Vivekananda, and modern Bluebeard, whatever that means, Henry Landru. But I mean, I've heard of Benjamin Franklin and I've heard of H.G. Wells, but they were born during that, okay? So Ray tells us when Neptune is transiting and conjuncting Saturn, so Neptune conjunct Saturn, the rules and regulations you lived by aren't working anymore. You need to replace them with a more creative set of habits and structures. Remind yourself that everyone who was born within a few months of you is also experiencing this transit, and be careful about money. Dum, 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 dum. So she also tells us, this is right now, Neptune in the sign of Aries, 1861 to 1874. You have an intuitive sense of self and take an active approach to your spiritual life, but you can wildly, no, that's bad English, but you can wildly inconsiderate. Okay, but you are wildly inconsiderate and you have trouble regulating your aggression. At times you can be far too weak, while at other times you're too aggressive and reckless. So it's quite a complex transit that's happening when Neptune conjuncts any flipping planet. Oh, do you know, I feel sorry for people that have got Neptune conjunct Mercury. How do they even come? I mean, I've got Mercury retrograde in Pisces, that's bad enough, but imagine if I had it conjunct Neptune as well. The waffle that you're hearing would be more than just waffle. So what we need to consider for our clients and for ourselves, where is it going in our own chart? Because trust me, Saturn transits affect everyone, left, right and centre. However, because this is astrology we're talking about, there's a spectrum of things. So it might affect people immediately and at once and right this second, because you were born with the sun at 0 degrees Aries and transiting Neptune and Saturn are exactly conjunct your sun sign, and you might have woken up thinking, oh my goodness, where am I at? What's going on? It could be that you've got Moon in Aries and now Saturn and Neptune are conjuncting that. But we've got 2 planets, not 1. And Saturn will be in the sign of Aries for at least 2 years. So I just want to demonstrate with this chart for this little lad, Alexandra Boulos. And I apologise if the parents are listening, which obviously they're not. I wouldn't in reality be reading the chart for a child that had just been born. That would be nothing short of cruel, okay? But I'm using the chart as a demonstration, okay, of a transit. So this particular child was born with Saturn and is 29 degrees Pisces, but Neptune was 1 degree into Aries. And as I'm speaking today, which is the 8th of March 2026, transiting Saturn is 2 degrees Aries and transiting Neptune is 1 degrees Aries. And those planets, along with Venus, because today Venus is 2 degrees Aries, they're all conjuncting his natal, they're conjuncting his natal Saturn because it's such a late degree, but they're also conjuncting his natal Neptune and is going to whack into his natal Venus. But those aren't as important as when eventually Saturn transits, I'm talking about Saturn now, when Saturn transit and goes smack into the ascendant. It's really, really difficult to ignore when Saturn conjuncts the ascendant. So if you've got an Aries ascendant, then go zooming over to astro.com and find the Ephemeris and go forwards in time and see when it's going to conjunct your ascendant, because you will know all about it, okay? It's really, it's the planet that brings your clients, basically. Saturn transits are life's hard knocks. Everybody has hard knocks. I don't think I've ever met anybody yet that has lived their whole life and not had any form of struggle whatsoever. It just doesn't exist. And I think the story of the Buddha was he was born into such a rich, well-off family and stuff, and he eventually, I don't know, walked out of the castle walls or whatever it was they lived in then, and he saw poor people and he saw people dying, and he hadn't seen those things, so he'd been quite protective of them, and that was sort of set him on his mission to eventually do the things he did. So if you've got... Sorry, jumping about the place. So this particular lad, Alexander, Saturn is going to exactly conjunct to his ascendant. So I've called up a transit rhythmogram from today. So this is 26, which goes through 27, 28, 29 to the end of 2030. And Saturn's going to exactly conjunct this little lad's ascendant in April 27. And trust me, it would be really difficult for nothing to happen at that moment in time. Now, Neptune's not going to conjunct his ascendant in, because Neptune travels a lot slower, okay, through the sign. Neptune's going to, transiting Neptune's at the moment, conjuncting his natal Neptune, is going to conjunct his natal Venus in May 29. But Neptune transits don't have the same whack as Saturn does. Okay, Saturn really makes us, especially the worst one is when Saturn conjuncts our natal Jupiter. It's definitely his dark night of the soul. It's horrible. Equally the other way around when transiting Jupiter conjuncts our natal Saturn. Because it's sort of like the reality of life finally hits. It's like, what am I all about? It's those questions that we ask, why am I here? Obviously, when you're teeny, those questions don't arise because you're just busy being teeny. And this is only next year that this little lad is going to get it conjuncting to his ascendant. So it's not at this moment. But he is still going to be a young'un. And eventually, into the future, Saturn's going to conjunct his sun sign. So that's in 2029. And then that does that August, September 29. And then eventually May 2030. So this poor little lad, because of the date that he was born, transiting Saturn is going to be the first major planet that is going to transit over his ascendant. Because Jupiter natally in his chart was in Gemini and today it's in Cancer, it's nowhere near his ascendant. That's going to take another 12 years to even get anywhere near his ascendant. So we also have to look at chart shape, and when anybody's chart starts in Aries, depending on where the other outer planets are they going to go through the sign of Aries? And these things don't happen every day of the week. You could live a whole lifetime and not have something outer planets-wise go over your ascendant other than Uranus, because that takes 84 years if you live to be 84. So if you whiz over to where the podcast is hosted, just to apologise to anybody that can't see the charts, go to astromary, astromary.libsyn, libsyn.com. The latest episode is always at the top of the page, unlike if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or iTunes. Whenever you sign in or whatever you first get there, you're only ever going to get episode number 1, and we are now episode 482. But on Libsyn, where my podcast is hosted, is always the latest episode that's top. So you'll be able to see this little lad's chart, and I'll put the transit rhythmogram up there. So basically this person, because they've got an Aries ascendant, is going to have Saturn transiting over the ascendant, and then Saturn going through the first house, and then because they were born with the sun in Taurus, which is the next sign of the zodiac, so they're going to have their early life is really going to be a little bit of a struggle for whatever reason. I couldn't even think what those reasons might be. Do the parents split up? Do they stay together? Does the child have some sort of challenges? I don't know. But we know with Saturn there is going to be a challenge. So if you're, don't look at your children's charts and scare the living daylights out of them. Look at your own chart and see what's going on for you. I do have numbers of people that ask me about other people in their world, and it's always a good idea to see what's going on for you first. Yes. Now, what happens if Saturn goes through each house? So let's go through that. What's going to happen when transiting Saturn goes through each of the houses in your chart? Because following close behind Saturn going through each house, Neptune is eventually going to go through there as well. So what I'm talking about today is the two things being conjunct at the moment, because over the next few years they're going to fall apart, and then Saturn's going to retrograde and they're going to conjunct again because Neptune is sort of catch up. And I just want to add in here a little note that Marion and Jonas said here. Neptune is the second of the transcendental planets. It's called a generational planet because it stays in each sign of the zodiac for approximately 14 years. Everyone born during this time has Neptune in the same sign. Therefore, for a personal reading, the house position is the most important factor. Because Neptune spends 14 years in a sign, its properties leave an imprint on that time. Thus, we have two descriptions for Neptune: the major historical happenings of the era, which is where we are now, and we're having a confusing type of war going on in another country whose name I won't mention, and the personal characteristics shared by people born during that time. Neptune represents both the spiritual urge and the escapist urge. It represents your wish to fool yourself and your creative and intuitive capacity. So which one do you want to choose? Being a nutter or a fool? Or do you want to use your creative, intuitive self? Question mark to yourself. Rhetorical question, obviously, not a literal one. Now, because I'm so ancient, I've lived through 2 Saturn returns, and I've also lived through, because my natal Saturn's in Capricorn, I've also lived twice through Saturn transiting through my sign of the zodiac. The first time it did it when Saturn transited past my sun sign, because my sun sign is located in the 7th house of close personal relationships. The first time Saturn transited through my 7th house of close personal relationships and exactly conjuncted my sun sign. I mentioned this in another podcast. My ex-husband ran off with another woman. So the second time that it did it, and I am remarried, Saturn happened to transited through my 7th house of close personal relationships, and just prior to that happening, or while that was happening, our beloved pet died, and it really put a massive strain on our marriage, and we went to counselling and we sorted it out. So it's not necessarily, as Marion and Marion Jones say, it's not the sign that things are in, it's the house that it goes through is where the impact is, yes, especially when it comes to Neptune, because I'd enjoyed every moment of Neptune being in the sign of Pisces. Absolutely loved it. Even when it was conjuncting my natal Mercury, it was so much, it was sort of like a wonder. It really was quite, and I wrote a whole book about it. I was so into it, transiting through Neptune, because I knew it would never happen again in my sign, in my lifetime. I wanted to enjoy every single moment of it. But trust me, I just did not enjoy when Saturn finally caught up with Neptune and started to transit through my 7th house. It really was a struggle. Didn't enjoy it. Okay, so let's just get a little intro to Saturn transit, and this is once again learn about the only way to learn astrology, learn about tomorrow, which is book 4 in this series. Actually, if you haven't bought them, they're jolly good books. Saturn takes between 29 and 30 years to go around the entire chart, and its cycle is considered an important factor in any type of forecasting. Saturn spends approximately 2.5 years in each sign of the zodiac, and therefore quite a bit of time in each house, leaving its Saturnian imprint and emphasis. Saturn's had a terrible reputation in the past. The ancients, in whom it represented the outermost planet, the limiting factor between them and eternity, named it as malefic, and in the literature passed on to us there's nary a good word said for Saturn. Yet, modern astrology and today's astrologers have found this planet to be one of the most useful ones. Stating with the simple fact that everybody needs some limits, Saturn is that planet that signifies keeping your body in shape by building your bones in place, by holding your bones in place, because Saturn rules the skin and skeleton. It represents your sense of responsibility, your ability to concentrate, to maintain self-discipline, to be organised, to persevere. Saturn can denote how much or how little ambition you have, your sense of achievement, of order, of duty, your ego direction, lessons in life, and your career. The positive use of Saturn principles defines your organising ability, gives you the right kind of caution in business, enhances your discipline, helps you take on new responsibilities with ease, and improves your ability to concentrate. Where Saturn transit is an excellent place to lay new foundations and a good time to start positive construction in some direction. The negative use could imply feelings of denial, restriction and frustration. You might experience career difficulties, physical debilities, separations, too much responsibility and even grief. Yes, I know how that feels. Now, Neptune, slow planet, takes 165 years to transit through all the signs and stays 14 years in each one, blah, blah, blah. Neptune is the weaver of dreams. It could denote illumination or illusion, idealization, rose-coloured glasses, inspiration, imagination, creative feelings. It can represent your feelings of compassion, intuition or perception so veiled that you get drawn into fraudulent schemes or become involved in deception. It's the most elusive of all the planets, and the ability to use Neptunian principles positively or fall victim to them depends on the degree of your self-awareness. So the things to consider while this conjunction and transit happens, so we've got 2.5 years of it, which house is going to have the 2.5 years worth of influence, yeah? And then the next house is the next 2.5 years, depending on what sign of the zodiac and what degree you've got for each of your houses. And if you're using the equal house system, whatever the degree of your ascendant is, will be the degree that the next house starts at that number. So this little chart example, Chappie Alexander, his ascendant is 19 degrees Aries, yeah? So anything's going to have to get to 19 degrees Aries before it goes slap bang onto the ascendant. Yeah? So if you want, and I'll put in the show notes the link for the keywords for the houses. So the first house is the self. So Saturn transiting through your first house is going to make you feel a restriction to your inner self, your outer self, the who you are, especially when it conjuncts the ascendant. Like, why am I here? What's it all about? It can be dark night of the soul. Second house, now Saturn transiting through the second will invariably affect your finances. I can't imagine it going through the second house and nothing happening to your finances. So if it's working its way through your second house, make sure, and always make sure when it's Neptune, that you're doing what's real and not unreal. So it's the sort of work hard planet, yeah. Third house is communication. That's also brothers and sisters. So watch out for your siblings when it goes through your third house. Are you communicating clearly? Fourth house is your home and roots and your family. So that'll be where you grew up, depending on what age you are. So it could be the family that you've left behind because it's your parents and stuff. It's not the family that you create. So when you become a parent, that ain't your fourth house. Your fourth house is your roots, yeah? So I did see in a client's chart once, so I've only seen it once, that Saturn was transiting through their fourth house when their family sold the home. Now, the home wasn't just like a bungalow like I live in. It was, I don't know what they call it in the UK. It was a stately home, that's the word. So mummy and daddy lived in a stately home. So it was like a, 15-bedroom mansion type of thing that they'd inherited because they were a lord or a baron or something or other. And the parents couldn't afford to live there anymore because they didn't earn enough to be able to keep the place going, and it got sold. And when that transited through this particular person's fourth house, that was what happened to them. So they really felt a loss of the family home. That really was a fourth house thing. Saturn transited through the fourth house. Parents sold the family home that this person had grown up in, and I don't know that they completely, I don't think anybody in the family completely recovered because it ended in the parents getting divorced and everybody ending up in different places. So it was pretty traumatic because they'd envisaged themselves as sort of, I'm Lord blah de blah, and now they weren't because they didn't have the great big mansion to go with it. So that's fourth house. Now, fifth house is creativity, romance and children. I'm born natally with Saturn in my fifth house. So I would say that when it comes to children, I only had one. With my Saturn's in the sign of Capricorn, it was perfectly happy in that sign. I gave birth to a child who has moon in Capricorn. So I thought that's quite a nice transit for me. When Saturn transits through your 5th house, because that's the house of creativity, romance, children, then you need to grow up and be the parent to those children. You need to grow up and be responsible about your creativity. If you're in a close personal relationship and Saturn starts going through your 5th house and you're just dating, you need to consider for yourself, how serious do I consider this relationship to be? When it goes to your 6th house of health, routine and work. Now I've seen that numerous people recently that have Pisces as their 6th house. It doesn't necessarily affect their health, but the advice would always be to take the health seriously when it goes to your 6th house, yeah. 7th house, I've already told about that, what happened with me, close personal relationships and marriage. It is not an indicator of divorce, okay? What it is an indicator of is how serious is the relationship, okay? So I took my first relationship seriously. My partner at that time didn't, because he's got a different chart, he's got different planets in different houses and blah, 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 blah. But that was how it was for me. 8th house, sex, birth, death, reincarnation. I don't really ever see that too much in people's charts. I don't know why, but I'm always seeing the investment thing. So Saturn transiting through the 8th house, depending on what age you are. Have you put away the right amount of money? Are you not saving? You need to save. If Saturn is going to transit through your 8th house, please put some money away. And anyway, a little bit of advice always, if you're self-employed, put away enough money that if you earned nothing for 3 months, you wouldn't starve, okay? Lots of people don't do this when they're self-employed, and it really is recommended because you never know what will happen. You could fall off your bicycle and something and poof, that's it. You can't do anything for a number of weeks and you've got no money. Stash some away, a little bit here at a time, so that if you've got 3 months worth of money, that's just enough to get you back on your feet again, or if you're in employment, get another job, okay? Little bit of advice there. 9th house is philosophy, further education and travel. If you're studying and Saturn goes through your 9th house, great. You're going to take your studying seriously. If you're traveling, make sure you can afford the traveling that you're doing. If you're philosophizing about things, you need to put the sort of the reality head on. Is what I'm believing in, because the 9th house is the house of belief. Is what I'm believing in true? Does it suit me? Is it a real thing? Yeah, because always put your reality specs on when Saturn makes a transit through a house or a conjunction to a natal planet. Now, I don't consider Saturn transiting through the 10th house as a negative thing at all. Saturn's the ruler to the 10th house. 10th house is equivalent to the sign Capricorn, and Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. So anybody that's got Saturn transiting through the 10th house, then take your flipping job seriously. You know, this isn't the time to turn up to work 3 hours late. It's to be responsible about the work that you're doing, yeah. Now, it can be that people will have jobs that suddenly change. Uranus is more a sudden thing, but realising the extent of the work that they're doing, they might want a job change. It depends. But a Saturn transit through the 10th is generally you're doing a positive thing, because it will add strength and reality to the work that you're doing. 11th house. I've never had a client complain about 11th going Saturn transiting through the 11th house. It is friendships. Can a friendship be challenged? It depends what planets you've got in there natally. Have you got, I don't know, Venus in there and Saturn transit through, and conjunction natal Venus in the 11th. Do you need to check on your friendships? Are your friendships real, or are they peripheral, or, not nice friendships? And then we get to the 12th house, which is the house of dreams and the unconscious and the hidden self. Again, I don't know that Saturn transiting through the 12th is necessarily, inverted commas, a negative-y type of thing. But again, it's about bringing reality to what is going on in that house and in this chart example we've got here, this lad has 3 planets there and also their natal north node, so the transit of Saturn. Now Saturn's not going to go back into the sign of Pisces for 30 plus years, 30 years or so, and their natal north node is there, and their natal Saturn is in the sign of Pisces, so they're not going to get that end of it because Saturn's going forwards, not backwards. So they're not going to experience the Saturn doing that for another 30 years into the future, because they were born with Saturn 29 degrees Pisces. Saturn has already done its retrograde and it is now moving forwards. Yeah. So that's Saturn going through the houses. Now, if Neptune's going through your houses, you just need to ask yourself, where is my imagination? Am I imagining too much? And the conjunctions that are occurring at the moment. Now, Saturn and Neptune have already made the exact conjunction this year. So when we get to the end of this year, December 26, we finish the year with Saturn at 8 degrees Aries, because it's just done a retrograde, whilst Neptune finishes the year at 1 degree Aries. Next year, at the end of 2027, Saturn ends at 21 degrees Aries, and Neptune is gone all the way back to 3 degrees Aries. So this year really is when the two of them are in the car together, with Neptune being in the passenger seat. So while that transit is happening this year, consider to yourself not to be distracted by Neptune at all, okay? If you are driving and doing something responsible, tell Neptune to hold off until you're at home and you're lying down somewhere and you can pay it a bit of attention, yeah? Because it's going to spend 14 years through the sign of Aries, whichever house it's going through in your chart. That is a long amount of time for a planet to be there, yeah? So again, consider your houses. When Neptune goes through the 12th, your own natal 12th house, that's not a car crash, yeah? That's okay, inverted commas, because that's its natural home. And always with transits, it's not just houses. We have to consider what other planets are also located in that house. So in this little Alexander's case, he's got natal Mars in the sign of Leo in his 4th house. So Saturn's not going to transit through there for another 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years' time. But for this year and next year, Saturn's going through his 1st and his 2nd house, yeah. And he's natally got planets there, because 1st house he's got Chiron and Mercury. 2nd house he's got Sun conjunct Neptune. So when Saturn catches up with that, again, that's something that can't be ignored. Something's going to go on. So keep into account also, if you've got an empty house, it's probably not going to have as much effect, inverted commas, as if you have a natal planet there. And you know all your planets now, so you know what it will, inverted commas, do. Because when a planet transits and pings into a natal planet, whatever aspects you've got in your chart between each planet in your chart, it accentuates and reignites those natal aspects. It's like the game pool, I think it's called, when it's balls on a table and they go down little holes and you use a pole to poke each ball. And the way it works, you don't just poke a ball, you poke a ball that then hits another ball that then makes the ball go down into the hole, which is how you get the points. And that's what aspects in your chart are like. So in this young lad's charts, he's got what have we got? Squares. He's got moon square Saturn. So his natal Saturn is 29 degrees Pisces and his moon is 24 degrees Sagittarius. It's still within orb. So whenever something comes along and in 30 years' time conjuncts his natal Saturn, it will immediately also set off the internal aspects that he has in his chart, which is Saturn square the moon, and Saturn represents dad and the moon represents mum, and they're square in his chart. Is mum and dad going to stay together? Rhetorical question, who knows? The The more friendly aspects is Saturn makes a summit to Pluto. Saturn does a sextile to Pluto. And so the transiting Saturn return is going to set that off as well. And so you need to also take into account the aspects that you have in your chart. It's not just the conjunctions that it makes. And trust me, conjunctions are terribly important. Okay, when a planet conjuncts and transiting planet conjuncts a natal planet, you can't miss it. You'll feel it, inverted commas. Feel it? Do you feel it? Something happens, okay? But it also sets off your internal stuff as well. So unless you've studied your chart considerably and understood the connections between those planets, you're going to project always onto others. Because Marion, March and Joan say in their book that transiting planets are stuff that goes on outside of you. Yes and no. It is outside of you, but it can trigger internal stuff as well. So you definitely need to study your chart to know, is this transiting planet, it's now conjunct to my Mercury, my natal Mercury is square to my natal Mars, am I going to get more cross with people, that type of thing. Yeah, does that make sense? So today we've just had a little chat about Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries, and the transit of Saturn going through each house in your chart. It will have more of a whack if it conjuncts to a natal planet in that house. So always look in the Ephemeris or the transit rhythmogram to when is that going to happen. Don't drive yourself crazy with fear about it. But if you're old and this is the second time it's happened, then you can learn a lesson from it, which is definitely what I did. I knew that I didn't want to get divorced. There was no reason to, but I wanted a few things to be sorted. So I hope you have a fab week. If you've got any questions on astrology, then do send me an email, mary@maryenglish.co.uk, and I'll be back next week. See you. Bye-bye now.